They pulled him aside, questioned his ticket, and treated him like a suspect for no reason. But when his mother arrived, they realized they had just made the worst mistake of their careers. Jalen couldn't stop checking his phone, not for messages, but for the time. His first solo trip, his first real taste of independence. The thought sent a rush of excitement through his chest. He had packed the night before, double-checking everything, boarding pass, ID, wallet, charger. His mom, always meticulous, had grilled him with last-minute reminders. Text me when you land. Keep your bag close. Don't talk to strangers. He'd laughed, rolling his eyes. Mom, I got this. Now, standing inside Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport, he felt the weight of it. The world was his. No parents hovering. No one to remind him to zip his backpack or hold his phone with both hands. Just him and the open sky ahead. Jalen adjusted the strap of his duffel bag, weaving through the airport crowd. The terminal hummed with life, families reuniting, businessmen power-walking with rolling suitcases, flight announcements echoing overhead. He took it all in, feeling grown. As he reached the check-in kiosk, he tapped through the prompts. Confirm flight. Select seat. Print boarding pass. Easy. His fingers moved quickly, the screen flashing his confirmation. A one-way ticket to Seattle. A short trip, just a weekend visit to see his cousin. His mom had booked the flight for him, as she always did for family trips. He hadn't thought much about it, until now. A printed pass slid from the machine. He grabbed it and turned, only to catch a pair of eyes locked onto him. A woman. Mid-40s, pale skin, blonde bob. She stood behind the counter, staring in that way that made people look away when caught. But she didn't. Her eyes flicked from him to the kiosk screen and back, her lips pressing into a thin line. Jalen hesitated, then shrugged it off. Maybe she was just watching the kiosk. He slung his bag over his shoulder and headed for TSA security. The line wasn't long. He ran through the mental checklist his mom had drilled into him. Shoes off, laptop out, liquids separate. A little girl in front of him tugged at her dad's sleeve. Daddy, why do we take our shoes off? Jalen smiled as the dad chuckled. Because they want to make sure our feet aren't made of bombs. The girl giggled, and Jalen let his shoulders relax. Everything was normal. His turn. He placed his bag in the bin, removed his hoodie and stepped forward. The TSA officer barely looked at him as he waved him through the body scanner. Clear. Jalen grabbed his things, laced up his sneakers, and took a deep breath. Gate B7. He followed the signs, weaving through groups of travelers. 15 minutes until boarding. He spotted an empty seat near the window and dropped into it, stretching his legs. Seattle. His cousin had already sent him a text. We'll hit the arcade when you get here. Bet I still beat you at Street Fighter. Jalen smirked, typing back. Bet you don't. His stomach grumbled. He had time to grab something to eat before the flight. He stood up, stretching, glancing around the terminal. And that's when he saw her again. The woman from check-in, standing near the counter, looking straight at him. This time, her expression wasn't just curious. It was stiff, calculated. And she wasn't alone. A man in a TSA uniform stood beside her. Jalen's pulse kicked up. He glanced around. Other passengers scrolled their phones, chatted, ate overpriced sandwiches. No one else seemed to notice. Maybe it was nothing. But then the TSA officer nodded, and the woman pointed. Straight at him. Jalen's stomach clenched. This wasn't nothing, but he had no idea what was coming next. Jalen swallowed hard, pretending not to notice the two of them watching him. He turned back to his phone, forcing himself to act normal. Maybe I'm tripping. Maybe they're just talking about something else. But deep down, he knew better. He glanced up again, just a quick peek. The woman had stepped closer. She spoke to the TSA officer, gesturing subtly in Jalen's direction. His stomach tightened. Jalen wasn't new to this feeling. The shift in the air, the way people looked at him just a little too long, the subtle tension in their faces, like they were expecting something bad to happen. He took a slow breath, trying to shake it off. He hadn't done anything wrong. His ticket was legit. His ID was real. He was just a teenager waiting for a flight. But then the officer started walking toward him. Jalen sat up straighter, gripping his phone. His mind raced through possibilities. Maybe there was a problem with his ticket. Maybe his bag looked suspicious in the scanner. Maybe. The officer stopped in front of him, hands resting on his belt. His face was unreadable. "Excuse me, sir. I need to ask you a few questions." Jalen's throat went dry. He forced himself to stay calm. Okay?" The woman from check-in had followed, standing just behind the officer, arms crossed tight. The officer glanced at Jalen's boarding pass. "Where are you headed today?" A simple question. But the way he asked it felt anything but simple. Jalen shifted in his seat. "Seattle," he answered, keeping his voice even. The officer nodded. "Traveling alone?" "Yeah." He could feel the woman's stare burning into the side of his face. The officer studied him for a moment. Then his next question made Jalen's stomach drop. "Who booked your ticket?" Jalen blinked. What kind of question was that? "My mom." The woman from check-in let out a small, almost smug breath, like she'd just confirmed something. The officer raised an eyebrow. "Your mother booked your ticket?" Jalen frowned. "Yeah, she always does." The officer didn't write anything down. He just stood there, looking at Jalen like he was trying to figure something out. Jalen's fingers curled around his phone. He hated this feeling. Like no matter what he said, it wouldn't be enough. "Is there a problem?" Jalen asked carefully. The woman spoke up before the officer could answer. "We just want to make sure everything checks out." Jalen looked at her, trying to keep his voice steady. "Why wouldn't it?" She gave a tight-lipped smile. "We have to be cautious with certain bookings." "Certain bookings?" Jalen's skin prickled. The officer kept his eyes on Jalen. "We just need to verify that this ticket actually belongs to you." Jalen let out a slow breath. "You can check my ID. It matches the name on the ticket." The officer didn't reach for it. Instead, he glanced at the woman. Jalen followed his gaze. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. The doubt. The suspicion. Jalen had seen it before, too many times to count. In stores when security trailed behind him. At school when teachers asked him twice if he really did his own work. The look that said, "I don't think you belong here." His fingers clenched around his phone. "I don't get it. Why are you only asking me these questions?" The officer hesitated. The woman answered for him. "Your reservation was flagged as irregular." Jalen's jaw tightened. "Irregular how?" She gave another one of those polite but not really smiles. "Your name didn't match the payment method on file." Jalen stared at her. "Because my mom booked it for me." The officer didn't respond. A couple of passengers nearby had started paying attention. Jalen felt it. The weight of people listening. Watching. He exhaled through his nose, forcing himself to stay calm. "You're saying I can't fly because my mom used her credit card?" The woman shook her head. "We didn't say you couldn't fly. We just need to confirm." Jalen cut her off. "Then check with her." That caught them off guard. Jalen lifted his phone. "I can call her right now." The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. The officer hesitated. Jalen didn't wait for permission. He swiped to his mom's number and hit dial. The phone rang once. Twice. Then, his mom's voice came through, calm and confident. "Jalen?" He swallowed the lump in his throat. "Mom, they're saying my ticket is flagged because you booked it." A pause. Then her voice dropped. Steady. Cold. "Put me on speaker." Jalen tapped the button, holding the phone up. "This is Alicia Holloway," she said. "And I'd like to know why my son is being stopped in my airport." The woman's face drained of color. The officer stiffened. Jalen almost smiled, but he knew this was far from over. The air around them shifted. The woman who had been so sure of herself just moments ago suddenly looked uncertain. The TSA officer's posture stiffened, his eyes darting toward the phone, as if he wasn't sure whether to keep questioning Jalen or back off. But Alicia's voice was sharp, controlled. "I'm waiting for an answer." Jalen didn't move. He didn't need to. He had seen this before. People who thought they had power until they realized they were talking to someone they shouldn't have messed with. The woman cleared her throat, regaining some of her composure. "Ma'am, this is just a standard security check. Your son's reservation was flagged." "For what reason?" Alicia cut in. "He's a minor. He's traveling on a ticket I purchased. That isn't illegal, and you know it." The woman hesitated. Jalen watched her, watched how quickly her confidence had cracked. "I asked you a question," Alicia said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made people listen. "What policy states that a minor flying on a parent's ticket is a security risk?" The woman opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The officer cleared his throat, stepping forward. "Ms. Holloway, we just needed to verify." "You needed to verify what exactly?" Alicia snapped. Jalen could picture his mum now. Standing somewhere in her office, one hand on her hip, the other gripping her phone. Her sharp, no-nonsense expression, the one that made grown men fold in boardrooms. "Would you be asking these questions if my son looked different?" Alicia's voice was even, but there was an edge to it. "If his name were Jake or Matthew, if he had blue eyes and blonde hair." The officer shifted on his feet. "Ma'am, we're just following protocol." "Then tell me the protocol that says he should be detained instead of allowed to board his flight." Silence. Jalen's pulse pounded in his ears. This was it. That moment where people realized they had backed themselves into a corner. The woman exhaled sharply. "Ms. Holloway, we weren't detaining him. We were just ensuring—" "You weren't detaining him," Alicia repeated, her voice low. "You sent security after him. You pulled him out of line. You surrounded him in public. And you did it based on nothing." The officer glanced at the woman, waiting for her to say something, anything, to justify their actions. But she had nothing. Jalen felt the shift. The moment their authority cracked. He stayed quiet, letting his mother handle it. Alicia sighed, her voice softening, but only slightly. "I own this airport. Did you even bother checking his last name before you assumed he didn't belong here?" The woman paled. The officer's mouth pressed into a thin line. Now he understood. "I want your names," Alicia said, voice steady. "Both of you." The woman hesitated. "Miss Holloway, I don't think that's—" "I didn't ask what you thought. I asked for your names." The officer's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, I'll ask one more time," Alicia said, her tone final. Silence stretched between them. Jalen watched as the woman's hands clenched at her sides, her eyes darting around as if looking for an escape. There wasn't one. The officer finally let out a slow breath. "Officer Daniel Rhodes." The woman hesitated, then muttered, "Rebecca Langley." Alicia was quiet for a moment. Jalen could almost see the gears turning in her head. "I want this documented," Alicia said. "Send me a full report of why my son was flagged and who authorized this so-called protocol. If I don't get it within the hour, I'll be making a few phone calls." The threat wasn't empty. Jalen had seen his mom do this before, people scrambling to fix their mistakes the second they realized who she was. Langley's face flushed. "That won't be necessary, Ms. Holloway." "Oh, it absolutely is," Alicia said smoothly. "Because this doesn't go away." Jalen's chest tightened. His mom was handling it. But it still stung, knowing they had looked at him and assumed something was wrong. Alicia exhaled. "Jalen, are you okay?" Jalen's throat felt tight, but he forced a nod. "Yeah." She was quiet for a second. Then, "You're still flying to Seattle." Langley opened her mouth. Alicia didn't give her the chance. "If he misses his flight, I'll make sure everyone involved remembers this moment for a very long time." Langley pressed her lips together. She knew she'd lost. Jalen gripped his phone. It should have never come to this. But something told him this wasn't over yet. Jalen stood there, his grip tightening around his phone as his mom's words hung heavy in the air. The officer, Rhodes, shifted on his feet, his jaw tight. The woman, Langley, had her arms crossed now, her fingers gripping at the fabric of her sleeves. No one spoke for a moment. Alicia broke the silence. "Are we done here?" Langley inhaled through her nose, her chest rising as if she wanted to argue. But she didn't. She just turned to Rhodes, waiting for him to take the lead. Rhodes exhaled sharply. "You're free to board your flight, sir." Jalen's stomach twisted. "Sir." Now, after all that, they wanted to act professional. He glanced around. People weren't exactly staring, but they weren't not staring either. He could feel the weight of their curiosity, the way some had their heads slightly tilted, pretending to mind their business while their ears stayed tuned in. He hated this. Jalen looked at the woman again, his voice measured. "So, that's it? I get questioned, pulled aside, treated like a suspect, and now you're just letting me go?" Langley blinked, like she hadn't expected him to challenge her. There was a misunderstanding. Jalen let out a dry laugh. "A misunderstanding?" Alicia's voice cut through the tension. "Jalen." He turned to her, and for the first time since this started, he saw it. The worry in her eyes, just beneath the cool, collected surface. She didn't want him to push it. Not here. Not in an airport. He swallowed his frustration and nodded. "All right." He turned, adjusting his bag over his shoulder. The terminal suddenly felt too big, too open. His feet felt heavier as he started walking toward the gate. Alicia's voice rang out behind him. "And Rebecca?" Langley looked up sharply. Alicia tilted her head. "You should rethink how you profile people." Langley's face flushed. Jalen didn't look back. He just kept walking, each step pulling him farther from them. He should feel relieved. The problem was solved. He was getting on his flight. But he didn't feel relieved. He felt tired. By the time he reached his gate, boarding had already started. He pulled out his phone, noticing a missed text from his cousin. "Yo, you good?" He hesitated, then typed back. "Yeah. Boarding now." He wasn't sure if it was a lie. "Excuse me?" Jalen looked up. A man in a button-up and slacks was standing near the boarding lane, holding a carry-on. He gave Jalen a small nod, then glanced toward the security area. I saw what happened back there." The man hesitated. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry you had to deal with that." Jalen blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, thanks." The man gave him an awkward smile. It wasn't right. Then, without another word, he turned and stepped onto the jet bridge. Jalen exhaled. His name was called over the intercom. Final boarding. He forced his feet to move, stepping forward and handing over his ticket. The gate agent scanned it, smiled, and waved him through. Jalen walked down the jet bridge, his heartbeat finally starting to slow. The closer he got to the plane, the more it all sank in. This trip wasn't supposed to start like this. He had imagined this moment a dozen times, walking onto the plane, feeling independent, free. But now, all he felt was exhaustion. He found his seat, slid his bag under the chair, and leaned back. Outside the window, the tarmac stretched wide, the city beyond it blurred in the afternoon sun. His phone buzzed. "Mom, I love you. Call me when you land." Jalen stared at the message for a moment before typing back, "I will." The flight attendant announced takeoff. He closed his eyes. But something told him this wouldn't be the last time he'd have to prove he belonged. Jalen barely noticed when the plane took off. His head rested against the window, but he wasn't really seeing anything outside. The city below blurred into nothing. He should have felt excited. Seattle. Freedom. A weekend away. Instead, his mind kept replaying the scene at the airport. The looks. The questions. The way they spoke to him like he was already guilty of something. The man back at the gate, his awkward apology, lingered in Jalen's head. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened to him. It probably wouldn't be the last. His fingers hovered over his phone screen. He thought about texting his mom again. But what would he even say? "Thanks for fixing things. Sorry you had to?" Instead, he flipped his phone over, letting it rest in his lap. The hum of conversation around him filled the cabin. Flight attendants moved through the aisles, passengers flipping through magazines, watching movies, settling in. Everything was normal, at least for everyone else. Jalen sighed, stretching his legs. The seatbelt sign turned off with a soft ding. "Would you like something to drink?" He looked up. A flight attendant, mid-40s, kind face. No hesitation in her voice. No weird looks. Just a simple question. Yeah, he said. "Water's fine." She smiled, handing him a small bottle. "Let me know if you need anything else, okay?" He nodded, muttering a quiet thanks. The moment felt regular, and that shouldn't have felt surprising. But after everything, it did. Jalen twisted the cap off the bottle, taking a slow sip, then a voice. "You good, kid?" Jalen turned. The man sitting beside him, maybe mid-50s, salt and pepper beard, reading glasses, was looking at him, not in an intrusive way, just curious. Jalen hesitated. "Yeah, just tired." The man nodded like he understood. "You handled yourself well back there." Jalen's shoulders stiffened. "You saw?" The man sighed, adjusting his glasses. "Saw enough." Jalen exhaled, leaning back. He didn't feel like talking about it, but at the same time, he kind of did. The man set his book down. "That ever happened to you before?" Jalen glanced at him, debating whether to answer. Then he decided to be honest. "Not exactly like that, but yeah." The man was quiet for a moment. Then, "Me too." Jalen blinked. "For real?" The man gave a tired chuckle. "You'd be surprised how little has changed." That sat heavy between them. Jalen shook his head. "I wasn't even doing anything." "You never are," the man said simply. Jalen sighed, running a hand down his face. The man leaned back. "Let me ask you something. What do you think happens next?" Jalen frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," the man said, tilting his head. "They made a mistake. A big one. And your mom..." He let out a low whistle. "She wasn't playing around." Jalen smirked. No, she wasn't." The man nodded. "So what happens next? You think they learn from it? Or do you think they just try not to get caught next time?" Jalen didn't answer right away, because he wasn't sure. The man sighed. "You don't have to answer that. Just something to think about." Jalen chewed on the thought. What did happen next? Would Langley go back to work tomorrow and pretend like nothing happened? Would Rhodes? Or would they remember? Would they hesitate the next time they looked at someone like him and assumed the worst? Jalen wasn't sure. But one thing was clear. They wouldn't forget his mother's name anytime soon. The pilot's voice crackled through the speaker, announcing their descent into Seattle. Jalen exhaled, glancing at his phone again. His mom's message was still there. He had a feeling this conversation wasn't over yet. The plane touched down in Seattle with a soft jolt. Jalen barely noticed. His thoughts were still tangled in everything that had happened. The seatbelt sign dinged, and passengers stirred, stretching, reaching for their bags. For them, this was just another flight. But for Jalen, it felt like something else, like the ending of a chapter he hadn't expected to start in the first place. His phone buzzed as soon as they pulled into the gate. "Mom, call me when you land." Jalen sighed. She was still on edge. And he got it. If their roles had been reversed, if she had been the one sitting at the gate, waiting to hear if her son was okay, he'd be just as worried. He grabbed his backpack from under the seat, slinging it over his shoulder. The man beside him, the one who had asked all those questions, gave him a small nod. "Take care, kid." Jalen returned it. "You too." The slow shuffle off the plane felt endless. He stepped into the terminal, the air thick with that post-flight energy. People rushing to connections, families reuniting, business travelers already on their phones. He spotted his cousin, Malik, standing near baggage claim, arms crossed, shaking his head dramatically. "Man, what took you so long? You fly here or walk?" Jalen forced a smirk. "Had to make a quick detour through airport security's personal hell. You know, VIP treatment." Malik raised an eyebrow. "Wait, what?" Jalen hesitated. Did he really feel like explaining? But Malik was already looking at him closer now, like he could sense something was off. Jalen sighed. "It's a long story." Malik grabbed his duffel bag from the carousel. Well, lucky for you, we got nothing but time. Jalen huffed a laugh. They walked through the terminal, weaving through crowds, but Jalen's mind was still back in Phoenix, still stuck on Langley's face when she realized who his mom was, on Rhodes's tight-lipped silence, on the way the man on the plane had asked him what happens next. Jalen knew what his mom would say, that it wasn't over, that she wasn't going to let it go just because he made it onto the flight. And she was right, because this wasn't just about him. It was about the next kid, the one who didn't have a mom who owned an airport, the one who wouldn't get that same last-minute realization, the one who might not get an apology. Jalen pulled out his phone, dialing before he could second-guess it. Alicia picked up on the first ring. "You're safe?" "I'm good, Mom." A pause. Then, "Did you get something to eat?" Jalen smirked. "I literally just got off the plane." She sighed. "Make sure you do." He hesitated. "Mom?" "Yes?" His fingers tightened around the phone. He wanted to ask her what happened after he left, if she was still dealing with it, if she was making sure it didn't happen again. But he didn't have to. He already knew the answer. Instead, he just said, "Thanks. For earlier." Another pause. Then a softer, "Always." Jalen exhaled. Malik nudged him. "Come on, man, let's go. You got an arcade to lose at." Jalen rolled his eyes, but followed. The airport doors slid open, cool Seattle air hitting his face. His trip was just beginning. But something told him what happened in Phoenix wasn't over. Not yet. And maybe that was a good thing. What would you have done in Jalen's situation? Have you ever experienced a moment where someone assumed the worst about you for no reason? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more stories that make you think.